Good afternoon, and thank you for being with us today. In 20 minutes, what I want to do, first, I want to say thanks to Paulus and Sadie for inviting me to spend a month with great colleagues at EOA in Paris. I'm very happy to be back. So during the past 5 years, I became really interested in what I call the dark side of morality. And this may sound a little counterintuitive to many of you because we have the idea, which is true, by the way, that morality is a good thing, for sure. So we know that morality, most people view morality as a product of gene culture coevolution specific to Homo sapiens. I don't think we can talk about morality in rats or chimpanzees, but humans, we have moral norms. And they are good because these moral sense provide us with a clear benefit to our social life. So we know that morality regulates, once again in the text, it regulates interpersonal exchanges, it facilitates coexistence and cooperation, minimizes or canalizes aggression. And in a way, morality allows to find a balance when individual interest can conflict with collective interest. So that's when morality is important. And we can say that, we are, each of us, motivated by morality because it's advantageous at the individual level. So if I speak as an economist, it's a non-zero-sum game. So that's the good aspect of morality. And we know also that when or whether or not someone considers a particular issue, whatever it is, can be immigration, global warming, whatever we want to discuss, to be moral, will strongly influence and is influenced by the way they think about it. So having something as a moral topic or issue or subject has consequences. That's what I want to say. So this is one study to show you how variable morals can be. This is a study done a few years ago in the US. And at that time, with that sample, you can see that discriminating on gender on the basis of gender is considered by 65% of the people being a moral issue. Probably it's against. 22% it's more like a social issue, and for some of them it's a personal issue. You can look at eating factory farm meat. Most people think it's a personal issue, but some people not. Quite a few, 27% of the sample consider that it is a moral issue. And I can go, like stealing money from your company, active euthanasia, that's an important topic because many countries are changing their regulation over active euthanasia in the world. It was done in Australia last year. I work on that topic, by the way. Anyway, so you see there is a lot of variability. And of course, this variability changes across time and geography. It's not the same norms today. They're going to change again and so forth. So I'm really interested in that as well. And for better or for worse, moral conviction, when people are really, really convicted about a moral issue, whatever it is, again, they trigger more ardent reaction and other attitudes and beliefs. That's what for me it's interesting. So, very often, moral conviction makes people engage in collective action that can be a source of progress in our society. I take examples that nobody will argue with, like, when women wanted to have the capacity to vote in the US in the 1920s, they got it in the 1920s, way before the French, by the way. That was people who were morally convicted about, voting, same with the civil rights movement in the US in the 60s, or in Paris in the 70s when women were marching to obtain the right to do whatever they wanted to with their own body and whether they wanted to have an abortion or not. So those are really good examples of how morally convicted people can, engage in collective action for the greater good. That's not what I'm interested in. What I'm interested in is this one. It's high level of moral conviction about any kind of issues can be associated with, when they are associated with greater perceived consensus within one's community or coalition, can also drive dogmatism, intolerance, and violence. That's why I'm interested, because we know there is a lot of research in cognitive psychology and social psychology as well, showing that when people have these absolute values, which is what morality is about, or moral conviction, it very often it will be associated with failure to engage in cost-benefit analysis and also resist trade-offs with other values, particularly economic values. It's very hard to have to find trade-off and a common ground in that case when it's the values are absolute. We know that very quickly, because I have only like maybe 10 minutes left. We know that morality does not equate with violence. There is a lot of work in anthropology showing that across culture and history, violence has been used and still being used today with the intention of sustaining a moral order, and can be expressed in war, torture, genocide, and homicide. Very often people think that genocide is something evil, but it's not. It is for the victims for sure, but the people who are committing the genocide, very often they think what they do is legitimate and they should be doing that. So that I want to understand this dark side of morality. Like, some example. This is a concrete example in Nigeria in 2002, the Miss World riot. More than 220 people were killed just because a newspaper had an article about the Prophet, and some Muslims were really upset about this article, and it led to these riots. In my country, in Wyoming, this is the case of Lorna Green. She's now serving 5 years in prison, and she has to pay $300,000 in restitution because she burned down an abortion clinic in Casper, Wyoming, motivated by a moral value. For Lorna Green, life is sacred. You cannot take one's life. You cannot do an abortion. It's something that is non-moral for her. And she has this very strong moral conviction that she should stop people. She didn't kill anyone, by the way, but she cannot understand that you can do that. So she has these very strong moral values against abortion. That's an example. And today, maybe people will disagree with that, but you see a lot of shock tactics of climate activists. They are really morally convicted, whether it's against global warming or, any kind of social issue. And they can be also extremely motivated by this moral conviction, and that can lead to violence, extreme violence sometimes, like this protest against a new airport that leads to people being injured on both sides, by the way. So that's one interesting. Or one more example about, like the difficulties that we have sometimes now in the US and also in Europe with, free speech, where this woman, Kathleen Stock, had to quit a job in England some years ago because she was the target of a transgender activist who thought that they were very upset against her because she said in one of her lectures, as a philosopher, by the way, that sex is a biological reality. And that was too much for the transgender activist. And after years of harassment, she had to quit her job. So it's a form also to me, of violence based on moral conviction. These people are very morally convicted about whatever the topic is. It doesn't matter what the topic is. So basically what I want to do during my stay at IAS is to write a theoretical paper to bring together this, I'm going to say it a little more if I have 5 minutes, showing that morality has two sides or two faces. A bright one, it motivates social behavior. It does canalizes aggression. It promotes group cohesion and cooperation, for sure. And I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the dark part, which is morality can also fuel dogmatism and intolerance. It motivates violent and collective actions, and it can easily justify vigilantism. And I remember people who are doing vigilantism are people who are really morally convicted. They really think that what they do is the good thing. It's legitimate. They should, take their action to their hand. They are not going to rely on the justice system. They're going to do it themselves. So that's what I'm interested in. And maybe that's provocative to some of you, but the idea of the paper I'm gonna write is that individuals who blow up abortion clinics or participate in violent protests against global warming or for animal welfare, may have indeed very different ideologies, very different values and political leanings, but they are fundamentally similar in several general psychological dimensions that I will explore. So I never said so far what is moral conviction. There is a lot of literature. There is nothing new about that. What's going to be new in my paper, I'm going to bring together work in anthropology, evolutionary theory, about coalition psychology, neuroscience, that's what I do, about the value system, the reward system. I'm going to bring this together into one coherent, hopefully, model. So, but moral conviction, let's take 1 minute to remind what it means. It's referred to a strong and absolute beliefs that something is right or wrong, moral or immoral. It's absolute. So, and then when you have this kind of absolute realism combined with greater perception of consensus within one's community or alliances, it's often associated with feeling of superiority and this kind of inflexible mindset and intolerance. That's why I'm interested in moral conviction. It's like they have this negative aspect. It can be good, not to me to decide whether the cause is good or bad. I don't care. I'm totally agnostic about what people care for. I'm more interested in the mechanisms. What are the mechanisms? And what if we know a lot about the mechanism, we can do sometimes something to help people to discuss rather than exclude each other. So I developed recently this kind of functional architecture of moral conviction. That's sort of like a nested model in which each of the main components can flexibly interact, reinforcing one another. So moral conviction, when people are really morally convicted, again, whether it's against global warming, immigration, the use of glyphosate for agriculture, whatever the topic is, there is something what we call objectivity. It's that people think their view, their principle, their value, their belief is objective. It's grounded in a fundamental truth of the reality. And as a result, it is applicable everywhere across context and space. It's not just for me, it's for everybody. Everybody should think like me. So that's what we call objectivity. And then there is also the social consensus, which is like the more people think there are people from their community sharing the same beliefs, principle, or values, the more likely this belief will be lead to a moral conviction. It's key. And then stability over time, the more people perceive a moral basis for their belief, the more stable the beliefs remains across time. So the three are interacting together. Produce outcome can be collective action, civic participation that we show you, or it can also lead to dogmatism and intolerance. And again, I'm very much interested in this dogmatic aspect of it. Why? I think I should stop soon. Why? What is the engine, so to speak, of moral conviction? What is the catalyzer, so to speak? That's the title of the paper I'm going to do. It's that what moral conviction does, it converts social preferences into value. Okay, so like take this example. Like most people in the US today, most people in the US today still think, I say still because I think it's changing, that eating factory farm meat is something as a personal issue. Okay, it's not a moral issue. It's not even more social. It's more like you do what you want. It's like if you want to have a tattoo piercing on your body, it's up to you. But as you can see, there are 27% of the people, it became a moral conviction, which means that if you ask them, it's like, not only we should not eat at factory, they don't want to eat factory farm meat, but they don't want people to eat factory farm meat. So that's the difference between the two. So it can be a personal value. I don't eat meat, you like fish, but no, it's very different. It's like, I don't eat meat, and you better not eat meat because it's bad for the planet or bad for your health. Whatever the reason, I don't care. I care about the value. And values are interesting because values, what they do, I have a small animation, I hope it will work. What values do is they motivate actions, they set goals. So values are motivational forces. They are a force of attraction or repulsion for whatever the goal. Values, they guide decisions and they motivate actions. So values, they represent a potential energy and desire. And we know the mechanism for that in the brain, the value system and the reward system. And I want to demonstrate that when people have these very strong moral values, we can, that's what I do in my lab just now. That's what we've been doing for the past 2 years. When you see people having very strong values, those values will be mapped, represented into very specific circuits in the brain. And for those who are neurologists or neurobiologists or whatever, neuroscientists, they know I'm talking about the reward system and the value system in the brain. So we know where to look, right? So there is nothing special about valuation. Valuation, it's like a basic need for all mobile organisms, even bacteria. Bacteria value what they do. But, and just to remind people, valuation is a cost assignment mechanism. It's the ability to assign values and to make choices based on those values. And what valuation they do, they put meaning into neural computation and are used to guide behavior. Valuation, it's like a form of a signal for energetic investment. So I'm going to connect that with, there is something very specific to humans. It's this one. There is something specific to humans because humans, we have the capacity, the unique capacity to value abstract and arbitrary objects, including ideology and symbols. All of us, we value our children. We value food and sex because these are things that are important to survive as a species. But that's, we share that with all other animals, by the way, caring for your kin, caring for finding good food and partner, that is not specific to humans. What's specific is this here. It's like we humans, we can care for an idea, a religion, a flag, a cause, whether it's global warming or this or this or this. And that will plug into the same system in the brain that assign cost value to object. The same mechanism. There is no specific mechanism about moral values. It's the same mechanism as any kind of value system in the brain. I don't think I want to. Yeah, can I say? Yeah, if I still have 5 minutes. One other aspect of the paper will be about the contribution of what we call metacognition to what I study. So we know that when people are highly morally convicted, very often, not always, they can become dogmatic, okay? They don't want to engage in critical thinking. And there is a lot of literature today on metacognition, and we know how to measure it. It's very easy. We have the tasks. There are perceptual tasks that we can do that in the lab all the time now. And there are very good groups in France with Joëlle Proust and her student who are now in Mazancieux in Grenoble, I believe, anyway. So it's really interesting because when people are really morally convicted and they become dogmatic, that is associated with confirmation bias. They have a difficulty to engage in cost-benefit analysis. That's why I'm interested in that. And that what we found is that what we study not in the lab is to look at when people are morally convicted, can we show that those people who are morally convicted and dogmatic, they have a lower, what we call metacognitive sensibility. That means that they have a mismatch in a way between what they do and their confidence level. We can measure both of them and relate these two statistical distribution. And we can see that people who are really dogmatic, sometimes they are very sure of themselves, although their actual representations are not always right. Let me give you one concrete example that I love. That study was done in the US, in Germany, and in France with representative samples. And what they show is that extreme opponent to GMO, genetically modified foods, in fact, those who are most extreme against the GMO are those who know the least. But they think they know the most. So if you ask them, what's your knowledge about GMOs in terms of biology? It's just biology, what is it? they think they know a lot, but when you test their knowledge, they don't know much. So the least they know, the more they think they do. You see, that's what we can measure with metacognitive sensitivity. And interestingly speaking, those who have this high level of, anti-GMO, they think it's bad. They don't know much. And if you know a lot about biology, I don't think you should be afraid of GMO. It's fine. I don't want to go there because, again, I'm not really interested in, the actual values, more about the mechanism. But that's a good example of showing that the mismatch between confidence and actual representation, actual beliefs. Anyway, so I'm done. This is the plan. I want to write this paper. The paper will be called The Power of Moral Conviction, How It Catalyzes Dogmatism, Intolerance, and Violence. I'm going to look at attitude, beliefs, coalitional psychology, dogmatism, evolution, metacognition, morality, sociology, and violence. What I want to do, as I said in the introduction, I want to bring together explanation from evolutionary theory, anthropology, psychology, neuroscience, economics, and political science together in the same paper. And you see, I have this outline. I don't know if I'm going to keep it this way, but anyway, I'm going to first discuss in the paper why studying moral conviction matters. And I will develop a functionalist perspective on morality, evolutionary theory, if you want. I will go to the social domain theory of morality and a chapter on what we call virtuous violence. And then I will explain what is this functional architecture of moral conviction, the moralization process, the value system, how it works with morality, morality and coalitional dynamics, metacognition and dogmatism, and finally something maybe more positive in a way, which is like, can we do something? I mean, can we try not to moralize too much? Because that's the goal. It's like, what I want to demonstrate, like once we moralize an issue, it's very difficult to find way to discuss, to find trade-off, people get very often polarized, and it's very difficult to discuss and find, like it's all about trade-off, right? We live together, we have different groups, different views, and we still have to live together. So being too much polarized, it's not a good thing for our democracy in a way. And I don't think moralizing everything is always a good thing. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much for, this fascinating talk. Are there any questions from the audience?
Yes, Jean-Pierre Changeux.
Yes, please.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. I have a question about the use of the word moral and the distinction you are not making between what could be moral hypothesis, assumption, or whatever, rules, and ethics. And to my view, one should clearly distinguish between the two. The issue of ethics being some universal predisposition of Homo sapiens for some positive cooperative relationships, whatever you like to call them, and so on and so forth, and contrasting this aspect with the development and differentiation of cultures. And then the issue is that when culture starts, they start to fight with each other. This is the issue of communautarism. And interestingly, what you say apply. But my question is whether one should not also consider not a positive side of moral, but of ethics.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre. It's so nice to see you again. virtually. I know we're going to see each other soon. Anyway, yeah, I don't make much a distinction in my work, at least between ethics and morals. I know there is one, and again, my goal is not to write a paper, a philosophical essay, or an ethics essay, because to me, when you use the word ethics, I don't know, maybe that's different from you. It's more like prescriptive morality, what people should do. What should we help someone dying if you want to die, or should not? I don't know. It's my view, which is like, I don't care. I care about the mechanism by which something that could be a social preferences becomes a moral issue, absolute, and we cannot change it. There is no way to discuss. So yeah, I don't see the word ethics the way you do it. We'll discuss about that. I don't know, but it's certainly not how people should think, right? So if people think it's good to, whatever, break an airport or a McDonald's in Paris against McDonald's, I want to understand, why do they have this strong moral conviction about whatever food or the free market, whatever, not so much about, is that good or bad? Not to me to decide anyway.
I think just to say one word more, I had the experience of being the chair of the French Bioethics Committee, and to discuss issues about abortion and whatever other issues that you mentioned as under the name of moral aspects. And the thing I found was that to have around the table people with different convictions, different cultures, different languages, and of course moral conviction, when you put them all around the table and then ask them, what do you think about this issue beyond the cultural differences, then they may agree to some extent, and that's what I call the humanitas, like Kant, of everybody who would forget in this reflection, which I call ethical, the origin of their conviction or whatever.
Thank you. We'll talk more.
Great. Any other questions? Yes, Patricia.
Yeah, so I was wondering, you were saying that moral convictions are absolute, and that was part of your definition of them. And I was wondering, what do you mean by absolute in that context? Because I take it that that's the fact that they are unrelated to what then? So what makes them absolute? Thank you.
Thanks, Patricia. Absolute, it is mean that there is no degree of variation in whatever. Let's take a concrete example. It's always, like one example, at least in the US, that works well, not so much in Europe, is abortion, right? So if you ask students or people, some people will be, pro-life or pro-choice, right? I'm not interested in these people, but there are people who are mostly like pro-life, it's easy to find this way, who have this absolute value that it's absolute, like life starts at day one, when there is the ovum and the somaton in the midst, and it's sacred, it's absolute. So if I come, and that's what I will do, so I said, okay, so you're against abortion, it's absolutely, I said, what if this is a very young girl, like she's 12 years old, she's going to drop off, I'm just saying, no, it's still bad. It's what about she was raped? Still bad. Well, what about she's young, she was raped, and the fetus is abnormal. The fetus will not survive. May happen, by the way. still go. So this is a good example of an absolute moral conviction that there is no possibility to bring evidence, factual beliefs, context. Context doesn't matter. It's the same thing whether you are a woman in Alabama or in South Africa. It's the same value. It doesn't matter. That's what I call an absolute moral value. It is across context, geography. There's no way you can change it. So that's an example. I have to take a concrete example.
So thank you very much for your presentation. I'm sorry I missed the beginning. So I have I have so many questions. I'll try to choose and wait for the articles. I worked a lot with, I'm a psychiatrist, and I worked a lot with terrorists of various, I don't know, groups. And I was interested because, I was interested in a lot of things, but how would you, to me, it's a good example of absolute, and how the mismatch between their actions and their convictions is not going to be enough to make them criticize, to get them to criticize any action whatsoever, and to get them into some sort of into the possibility of any kind of discussion about their logic. And I guess, but I don't know if you would agree, but it's also because of the power of morality that it's brainwashed, that these morals are targeted specifically in the brainwashing system. But then I was also interested in, for example, you were saying that not everything should be moralized. If you take, for example, your example of abortion, how do you get morality out of abortion? Or how, there's so many topics that people feel so strongly about, that they're, that have debated, or feel like they've debated, or feel like they already know everything. So how do you take the morality out of that?
Thank you very much, Ariane. First, I totally agree with you that I work also on terrorism with the US Department of Defense. For the past 5 years, we've done a lot of work scanning brains and stuff like that. So I totally agree with you that most people who commit action of terrorism are highly morally convicted. They really believe they are doing something good, whatever, for God, for their group. So I totally agree with you. This is one of the extreme examples of why moral conviction can be bad in a way, right? So not to them, but to us. Of course, depends where you are on which side of the border you are. I see terrorism as, like an example of extreme moral conviction can lead. So that I totally agree with you. The one thing I disagree with you, but I would be happy to discuss with you in person if there is a chance one day. I don't think terrorists are brainwashed. I don't think so. I think they have their own values coming from their own group. They have a cause. Whether we like the cause or not, they have, it's very rational. It's their narrative and their history. So I think they have something. I don't think brainwash if like they educate their kids the same way. We do the same thing, by the way. We do the same thing. It's just like we're not on the same side. My kid went to special school. I chose the school according to my values. So, but anyway, and then the second part of your question, which is more challenging to me, it's like, what do you do? So the thing, I don't know we can do something for sure, not always, like pro-life, pro-choice can be really difficult to bring people together. But the thing that most interesting is like when you have this moral conviction, there is no it's impossible to do like what we call a cost-benefit analysis, right? So you can say, okay, you're against abortion. I understand. Don't criticize people, don't make fun of them. That's not a good way to have a good strategy. You're against, but let's look at the cost, what the benefits, right? So we do that all the time. And I think that when we do this cost-benefit analysis, including for things that are moralized, we are in a better position to make progress as a society rather than, like, it's my view, I cannot talk. So I think we have to use our reasoning capacity that we also have as humans, say, well, let's do as much as we can this cost-benefit analysis. There is a cost for sure, but what are the benefits? And let's look at the balance between the two and what's best for you, for your daughter, what's best for the society. And then again, no people are totally close-minded in terms of cost benefits. Like you said, terrorism, like, you want to send rockets to, let's say, you send rockets to Israel, okay? So what's the benefit? The cost is huge. Every time the Hamas does that, or Hezbollah, the Israeli will retaliate, kill 10 to 1. So you could say, look, the cost-benefit analysis, like, maybe there's a better way to make a deal with the country next to you by looking at cost benefits. But we know at the same time that when people have these very strong moral values, they become sacred. There is no way you can say, we give you money, stay in peace. Let's cooperate. So yeah, find ways. I don't know. It's the challenge, Ariane. The challenge is to find ways to kind of not force, but engage people in cost-benefit analysis before they do these extreme actions. We'll be better off, all of us. But I don't have the recipe for that for sure. But I'm always trying to push people to have this cost-benefit analysis. And I know when they are morally convicted, that's closed. No more. No more. Any cost is okay. Any cost. You kill my people, doesn't matter. This is my value. And there is no hope there.
Thank you. I think that's all the time we have. Thank you so much, Professor Decety, for the talk and the questions.